And welcome back here to Open. The COVID-19 phase has been pretty rough for people to deal with. And when we talk about the fear and anxiety of how to handle the stress that comes along with it and possibly a second wave, it can overcome a lot of people. And so, how can one actually reduce the stress and trauma during this time? Joining us now to tell us more is the founder and the president of Scudder Intervention Services Foundation. We're pleased to have Brett Scudder with us. And Brett, good to have you.
Good to be here, my brother. Good to be here. Good morning. Thank you.
No, good morning to you. And certainly, when we talk about this, obviously, a lot of people are still navigating from COVID-19. And I was looking at an article not too long ago talking about the recovery effort. That after one physically recovers, there's also the mental and the emotional recovery. And that's not just for the person that was actually infected, but even for those who were around. And so I don't think we've given a lot of, well, we have probably given some emphasis, but not as much as probably we should to mental health when it comes to COVID-19.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very significant issue when you look at how scary this virus is and how many people have died from it. There are a lot of people who are so afraid of it that it has caused a big rift in our communities for families and friends who will say, look, I don't want anyone coming to my house. I don't want to be around people because I'm afraid of being infected. Or people who have been infected who have passed that on to other family members who are dealing with it. The psychological impacts have been tremendous. We just have been focused on the death, but not really the mental and psychological impacts of fear that a lot of people are feeling from the virus. And now that we're coming into the summertime and people are being, going out, more exposure, a lot of people not wearing masks, a lot of people are not safeguarding themselves. It's a heightened fear for a lot of people who are looking at it like, oh my God, this is going to increase the risk or spread of the virus. So there's a deep mental health impact of this that we're not looking at. And now that we're coming out of the heavy phase of death, people are starting to really take a breath and realize like this is really a serious issue and we need to look at the impacts on a broader level.
Yeah. We talk about the impacts. Some of those impacts deal with depression. Another impact is actually suicide. Talk to us about depression and suicide and how that's played an important part in this whole thing that many people may not really be paying attention to.
Well, if you think about it, a lot of the depression that comes from it is out of the fear and the lockdown. So some of us have been locked down for 2, 3 months in our home in fear of just being out. That can be very depressive if someone is lonely and isolated, cut off from all their friends. But we're also seeing that in young children who no longer were able to go to school, who are not able to be socially active as they were. So it's a big issue across the board for depression and anxiety, and how that sometimes can force someone to feeling a sense of being overwhelmed, feeling hopeless, feeling helpless, and be like, you know what? I don't even care if I catch the virus or not. If it kills me, I'm happy that it kills me because I'm tired of living like this. And so we've heard those comments. We've heard people actually say that I'm not afraid of catching the virus because if it kills me, then that's a good thing. At least it would have solved the problems of what I've been going through. Or this fear that I keep hearing them talk about, there's no vaccine, there's no solution to it, and we may be going into a second phase.
Yeah.
So there's an overwhelming impact of too much news that's out there and too much information out there that's causing a lot of people to feel overwhelmed, anxious, and depressed from just all the negativity of this virus.
Yeah. Walk me through walk me through a little bit about this. When we talk about overcoming depression, how does one overcome depression given the fact that this has been, this has very much been mind altering.
You know, depression is a word, but it's also an experience, right? And so that experience is something that people feel on different levels. And so while it's a word, we have to understand individually how people feel. So for example, you and I, right? We are both experiencing this virus and this pandemic and the lockdown from it, right? But we have reacted to it differently. So even if we're both depressed, your level of depression, maybe you're still able to function. Mine, maybe I'm shut down in my house in fear, living in my bedroom, in my bed, can't get out, I'm not eating, I'm not socializing or isolating myself. That situation right there is an unhealthy one. But we have to understand why people feel that way. It's because of the social anxiety, yes. So how do we get out of that? We got to check in. Daren, I'm going to call you. I'm going to check in with you and say, hey, brother, how are you feeling? How are you doing today? You're going to call me tomorrow. You're going to say, hey, Brett, how are you doing today? Let me encourage you. We encourage each other. Check in on people, not assuming that we know how they're feeling, but checking on them to see how they're feeling, giving them the opportunity to express how they're feeling the way they're feeling it, and not think that because the pandemic may be passing by, the death rates may be going down, that we think people are okay and people are dealing with that well. The problem we have right now, Daren, is that people are not being allowed to express how they're truly feeling. And until we know how they're truly feeling, like let them just kick, holler, scream, vent, and curse, we will never know how they're going to be recovering from this. The psychological impacts are going to be long-term trauma for a lot of people.
And I want to jump in here because when you talk about that psychological impact and long term, there's this thing called intergenerational trauma, and I wonder if
Yes.
you could speak to that for a minute.
So intergenerational trauma is trauma that has experienced from our ancestors coming up through time, that we continue holding on to the psychological impacts of that, how it has changed our behavior, how it has changed our mindset, how it has created fear in us in terms of fear of certain things. So if you look at right now, this pandemic, for example, asking ourselves, how is this pandemic for the next 2 or 3 generations going to impact our children and their children? As we look at the fact that millions of people's lives have been impacted, hundreds of thousands of people have died, and the fact that they're saying that this virus has altered or is even altering our DNA and our body structure. So when you look at the generational trauma that will come from this pandemic, we don't know how that's going to reflect on a lot of us as we go forward. We just know that right now it's important for us to deal with it right now, so it's not a generational crisis going forward. Because that's how generational trauma is perpetuated, is whenever we don't address the issues that we're facing or whatever events that traumatize us, we carry on and we pass it on to our children and our grandchildren and keep cycling it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Brett, thank you so much for sharing with us. I know it's a lot for us to really have to pay attention to during a time like this. And when we talk about the mental health component, it's something that's going to be playing out and people are going to be dealing with for some time. Brett Scudder, our guest here on Open. Thank you so much for joining us, Brett.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, sir. Have a good day.
All righty. And listen, we want you to stay connected to us. We do have more Open. We're coming right back right after this.